Good afternoon. I'm Dave Thompson. I am the Education Director for the ACE Academy of Cleaning Excellence and President of the Green Clean Institute. This afternoon we're talking about cleaning for health, microbes, and sanitizers. So come back after this message and we'll have something for you.
Live from Orlando, Florida, and the ACE Learning Center at Gym Supply, it's Beyond Clean with Dave, a weekly broadcast for professionals in environmental health services around the world. Your host is David Thompson, Director of Education for Gym Supply, and his mantra is, I am a janitor and I save lives. And now let's listen to Beyond Clean with Dave and today's guest at the ACE Learning Center in sunny downtown Orlando.
There are three words in which I focus on each and every Friday afternoon. Those words, healthy, positive, and proactive. Today my guest is calling in from St. Louis, and you might know him. He's always talking about making some surface healthy for us to touch and safe and clean. Welcome my regular guest speaker from St. Louis. He is the EVS Director for GCI, Darrell Hicks. He's back on the show. He's going to be talking about cleaning for health, and that's the issue today. But you know what? It's what you don't see can hurt you. Darrell, explain that.
Thanks, Dave. It's good to be here again, but you know what you and I believe and what we know to be true is that a clean building might not be a sanitary building, but a sanitary building is always going to be a clean building. And so we need to move our focus away from just cleaning for appearance sake. That means putting wax on the floors, or like I like to refer to it as floor finish. But you know, I was in a local Walgreens the other day, and you know, you walk in, the floors are nice and shiny, and I was standing there in line, I looked down, and the corners must have had crud in them. It's like the stripper dried and they just put wax right over the top of it. So to someone who comes in that into that store, you know, the floors look shiny, but you can make dirt look shiny.
Oh yeah, I guarantee you what, I used to be doing that stuff in another chain store, and I had the shiniest dirt in Oklahoma. It didn't say anything about being healthy.
Well, that's what, you know, that's all the old school, and we're here to bring you up-to-date ideas and notions about the role that professional cleaning folks play in preserving the health and the well-being of our society.
Right. This is about health, not about what we perceive as clean anymore. So I think there's a lot of things growing everywhere, including ourselves. But what's harmful? I mean, where's it at?
Well, it's, you know, it's the microorganisms that we cannot see. And, you know, microorganism is a big word that means that you need a microscope in order to see it. And so we have to be able to look beneath the soil. That sometimes the soil isn't all that visible to us. Whenever it becomes visible, it's a real problem. But, you know, the soil that we can't even detect with the human eye still holds this world of bacteria. Some of it, you know, 95% of it is good bacteria. It won't hurt you. It won't cause disease. But it's the other 5% that we call pathogens. Pathogen is a medical term that means that it's an organism that can cause illness or death. So this 5% is what we don't see, and it lies beneath the surface, kind of like, you know, you see the tip of the iceberg, but down below that iceberg is this whole large group of microorganisms that some healthy and not a threat to human health, but the 5% that is the ones that cause disease and even death.
Yeah, and this is growing everywhere. I mean, you know, this biofilm of these unhealthy pathogens is everywhere. It's not just located only in a hospital. I mean, I know that.
Yeah, I think that people who go into healthcare organizations, whether it's your doctor's office or the urgent care center or perhaps visiting your grandparents in the nursing home or in the hospital, that we all kind of put our antenna up about those being maybe germs that could harm us. But I'm telling you, those same organisms, because not everyone with these bad pathogenic organisms are in hospitals. They work alongside of us. They go to school where your kids go to school. So they're all around our society, even in these fitness centers. Those are a pretty good breeding ground for a lot of bad germs that people go there to improve their health. But if it's not sanitary, then it could be harming you.
Well, I go to a lot of educational facilities, and then we're talking, I guess there's locker rooms and all that kind of stuff there, and it's there, isn't it?
Yeah. In fact, I know of cases wherein high school locker rooms that MRSA, which is a methicillin-resistant staph aureus. You may hear it called MRSA, but MRSA has really impacted high schools, and it's the sports locker rooms and wrestling mats. Some of those things that happen in those locker rooms, and think about football pads that never get laundered, let alone sanitized or disinfected. And so there's opportunistic organisms that thrive in that warm, wet sort of environment in locker rooms, and it even happens in professional sports. There's a kicker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a professional kicker, and wound up losing half of his foot from MRSA that he says he contracted in the locker room of their facility there in Tampa.
So this is not only just there; it's coming outside of there, getting spread around our whole community at large, and then it goes back to the hospital. So it's kind of like this merry-go-round.
Exactly, and so because we don't know what is dirty and what's clean, one of the best things that you can do is wash your hands. And it's some of the best advice your mother ever gave you was to wash your hands, because it's this hand, we pick it up with our hands, and then we touch our faces, we rub our eyes, we studies have shown that we touch our face 15-20 times an hour.
Okay, so wait a minute. The audience is now going to start counting how many times I'm going to touch my face. Thank you, Darrell. I appreciate that. This is live, and they're going to be asking. Now I got to be conscious about that. All right, so and to that point, I think is we always during the flu season, which we're almost out of the flu season.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't keep carrying this around, and that this still isn't a risk.
Right. And the one thing, bacteria usually has a life, but viruses never die. Viruses aren't like most other living organisms that need food and water and oxygen. Back in 1918, there was the Spanish influenza that went around the world and killed 20 million people. But at the CDC in Georgia, they still have a sample of the 1918 Spanish flu virus that's still alive.
I don't think that the audience really wanted to hear that, Darrell. I know that. You've told me that many times, but gee whiz, come on.
Viruses don't die. They attach themselves to bacteria, and that's how they replicate. Wherever the bacteria divides, and the virus divides with it. But viruses are very, I forget the term, but they depend on other organisms to live.
Well, they need a host. Viruses need a host, and
exactly.
Bacteria can live on their own. So you're talking about there's the basic bugs that I know about. So tell me if I'm wrong. Our basic bugs are bacteria, virus, mold, or fungus, and those are kind of the basic three.
Yeah, and one that doesn't get a whole lot of attention is fungus, but you know, there's this new one that's going around. It's called Candida auris,
Oh yeah,
and
easy for you to say. Come on.
it just has shown up in the U.S. It's been over in Europe and other countries, but it started showing up here, which shows how these bugs get to travel around the world. And whatever organism is in one country one day, it can be halfway around the world the next day because of our travel.
Well, that's exactly what I keep saying. Really, if you think about this, folks, we're in infection prevention. We're actually in healthcare every day that we go in a building. We're not in the cleaning business anymore. We're in the healthcare business.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, is that we need to move away from the notion that we're professional cleaners, but we're actually preventing infections. So we ought to be infection preventionists, and we ought to be regarded as vital to the public's health.
Well,
And
I'm going to throw something at you because I just created a new course down here in Orlando called Environmental Hygienist, and it's all about infection prevention. And that's the reason I did that. Is comes to our conversations. It's not about cleaning. It's about protecting the environment from a hygiene standpoint.
exactly. And if we do our jobs and do them to a standard, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about, is that if we do a better job of soil removal, you know, if we can remove 99.9% or 99.9% of soil from a surface, then there's not much left there for bacteria to feed on. You can attain that with the right microfiber products and just water. But when you add the disinfectant to that microfiber product, then we've moved away from the term of cleaning. And what I wanted to do is introduce a term to our listeners today, and it's called processing. And that term, I'll just glance down here. The term process, as used, includes cleaning and disinfecting an item or an area using a clean microdenier, cloth or flat mop, and an appropriate EPA registered disinfectant. So you have those two elements. You have the right cloth and the right disinfectant, and we process rooms. We don't clean them. We process telephones. We don't clean them, because if we use the right tools and the right chemistry, then we are processing surfaces and leaving them safe, clean, and disinfected.
Okay, so the thing about it is I always say in class is that, you know, we cannot really articulate what clean is. And every time I ask somebody what clean is I get this blank look and everybody kind of has a pause. And what you're saying is I need a process that replaces that item or that subject of not being able to quantify it. So if I process it, I have a pattern, I have knowledge, I have the tools, everything has to go. It's basically best practices.
Exactly. And then we need to validate that what we're doing is actually leaving the surface clean and disinfected. And so, you know, I think that people get confused with thinking that a sanitizer and a disinfectant are the same product, or, you know, we understand disinfectants to be stronger than sanitizers. But I just want to let you know what a disinfectant is, and it's called a log reduction. Wherever you see labels on disinfectants, it talks about a 2-log, a 4-log, a 6-log reduction. A 3-log would be a 99.9%, and we say, well, 99.9% is pretty good. If I got that on one of my high school papers, I would have been elated. I was not
wait a
in
minute.
that.
What do you mean? If I got? You don't think I got that? Come on, Darrell. So what you're saying is this is the difference between a basic general disinfectant, a sanitizer, a hospital grade disinfectant. So I'm going to get this log reduction. Now, I've heard you say this before. And a log reduction is not just a term you use, but this is a scientific way to validate the results.
It's a measurement.
Okay.
So if I start off with 1 million pathogens on this desktop and I clean it to a 99.9% level, there'll still be 10,000 microorganisms after I've reduced them 99.9%.
Well,
So
yeah,
I'd
but
still have
10,000's a lot.
10,000 is a lot, but most food processing plants and kitchens, they use sanitizers, and it's a 99.9% reduction of the pathogenic organisms on a surface, because if they use a disinfectant, then they've got to rinse afterwards. So what you'll see is them normally just using a sanitizer. But if we're really after the bad bugs, then we're going to go for a 4-log reduction. 99.9 was leaving 10,000 on the surface, but if we go to a 4-log reduction, then we only have 100 left. After we start with 1 million, we reduce it 4-log reduction, which is 99.9999%, then there's only 100, and you can get it down to 10. So you'll never, you never get it down to 0, because that would take sterilization, which would mean an autoclave and
Right.
steam.
We can't autoclave a doorknob and, well, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to touch the doorknob if you autoclave it. I'll say it that
Right.
way. We can barely get them to go by with a rag and wipe it once a day. So we're talking about all of these surfaces. I have to really know what I'm doing. There has to be a difference between what I know and what I do. And this is getting very, well, if you will, very precise. I mean, as we said before, we have to validate what we're doing, because now you mentioned a fungus that is now coming in. Do you have any statistics on that fungus and what it's doing in our environment? You said it came over across the sea?
Yeah, I think there's been 30 cases reported here in the U.S., which seems like a small number, but this is one that CDC is watching, because people who get this organism, the mortality rate, there's been 30 cases, and I think there's been 15 deaths. So that's 50% of the people that get the organism. Ebola, we all remember it from 3 years ago, and which, depending on which Ebola there was, the Zaire Ebola, the death rate, the mortality rate was about 90%. 90% of the people who got it died.
Well, I think this is one of the things I wanted to bring up, is because when I came down here and started this show, one of the things that you and I talked about, Darrell, is that we wanted to be able to talk to the audience on a timely manner and something that was going on currently. And I think this is what you're bringing up today. I didn't know about this new fungus and the I guess the severity of it, and that we needed a sporicidal disinfectant instead of a general disinfectant. So I think, audience, this is what we're trying to do, is on the shows, we're trying to bring you all kinds of current relative information. And Darrell, I think that's what you're doing today, is this is new stuff. But maybe it isn't. Is it just a new thing and we should still be doing it anyway?
No, I think that, because of our, antibiotic resistant, organism or society, where we want an antibiotic if we got an earache. And, so antibiotics have driven these bacteria to mutate and to become resistant to the strongest antibiotics that we have. So it's going to continue into the future, and they're talking about like 50 million deaths a year worldwide by 2030. So that's only 13 years away, and we may have 50 million people a year dying of these antibiotic resistant organisms. But one thing we do know is that on the surface we can take care of it, because we process things correctly, and that we use the right tools, the right equipment. Have educated people on those front lines. We've given them enough time to do the task, and then we're measuring the cleanliness of those surfaces. So we're validating what we're doing, and once it's out on the surface, then we can save lives if we do our jobs right. So I circle back to what I started off with, to say that a building is sanitary because it appears clean is not true, but a sanitized building is always going to be a clean building.
Okay, well, you finished it off. I couldn't say anything more, Darrell. We're going to have you on the show again next month, and I'm sure you're going to have some other new bug that I got to worry about. Anyway, you always have a good reason for why I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. It's great having you on the show again, Darrell, and spending some time with the audience and myself this afternoon. Folks, if you have asked about these classes, we mentioned a couple of them. You can go to the gym website. That's gymsupply.net. If you go to the education button, you click on that button, you're going to find our live classes. We have them in Orlando and our other 3 locations. I've got a Facebook page. You're going to find my nice bald face and head there. Go ahead and like and share my page. Please do so. If you've gotten through all of that and you still need some more information, go to my website, beyondcleanwithdave.com. All of our past shows, and even some pictures from what we're doing here at the Academy. So I guess until next Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., I'm Dave Thompson, live from Orlando. Keep changing your future. Keep those changes healthy, positive, and proactive. And remember my mantra, I am a janitor, and I save lives. Now, don't run away. I've got something more for you, because I'm going to tell you what we're going to be talking about next Friday. So come right on back.
You have been listening to Beyond Clean with Dave and his guest. Sharing what you learn with others is what turns knowledge into professional development. Live classes are hosted each week at one or more of our 4 locations in Central Florida. Remember, janitors save lives. Be sure to put us on your schedule to watch next week as we present another broadcast of Beyond Clean with Dave.
Okay, so this next Friday, I'm going to be talking with Toby Keeping. He is with SWEPT. They are presenting a new program here in the Tampa, Orlando, and Miami area. We're going to be talking about the janitorial profession and some new things that we're doing. So be sure to tune in with me next week. We're going to be talking about these issues and so many more. Well, I guess that's this coming Friday. Come on right back with me. Bring your smart device like everybody else does.